Good afternoon, as it is. Do you believe that every member of your team is working together and individually as effectively as possible? I'm going to share some tips over the next 30 minutes that will show you how to make your team more productive, kinder, and make it a psychologically safer workplace. And I think it's an even bigger issue today with many teams not even working together because they're not in the same location, as well as personal stresses probably higher than normal because of all the issues that are going on with COVID. Now, I'm sure that you'd agree with me, you're always going to have introverts and extroverts and everything in between in your team. Now, in my opinion, the best leaders engage introverts, extroverts, and everything in between equally well. So I'm going to focus on helping you to do just that, but I'm going to focus particularly on the introverts in your team. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, because it's where I've spent a lot of time researching, and I've researched and done 350 individual interviews with people and found that a third of people are not fully productive. And the common themes that come back are introversion, communication, and culture within a business. And each of those, or the last two certainly, are leadership traits. They are things that we as leaders can change within the business. So I want to focus on that. And secondly, the other reason for talking about introversion is because they are the most easily disengaged. But just before we do that, I'd like to get some of your help for a second, if I could. I'd like you to grab a phone that you can connect to the internet with, or a tablet, or even open a browser, as long as you don't lose me in the process. And I'd like you to go to menti.com. And it will then ask you for a code. And I'd like you to type in 23 11 25. And it'll ask you a question, and it'll say, how do you define an introvert? And I'd just like a 1 or 2 word answer. You can actually give me 2, 3 1 or 2 word answers. But just play with that for a second. And once you're done, just put that one to one side and then return to the tab that you're already at. So menti.com, 23 11 25. We're going to use this again a bit later on in the presentation as well. So let's just see how you define the word introvert. And it gives me a moment to be quiet. I like doing that because I'm an introvert and I like being quiet. You see, you thought I'd start off and wouldn't stop talking for half an hour, didn't you, Valentina? Oh no. Make people work. That's always the best thing. Okay, so hopefully you've got a couple of words in there, and we're going to have a look at those in a moment. But I want to get back to this issue of making a psychologically safer workspace, making work a kinder place, particularly for introverts. But before we do any of that, I want to take you back in time to when I'm dressed up in black rubber. Careful now, not bit like Martin is today, but dressed up in black rubber, gripping a rope and skimming on a dinghy across the English Channel. The waves are smashing us in the face, and I'm wearing heavy scuba diving gear because I'm with 6 of my best friends and we're going diving. The boat slows down. We look around. We check we're all okay. And then roll off backwards straight into the water, and we sink like stones 2, 3, 4, 5 meters. And that's good. I want to come back to that point in a minute, because at that point we're all really, really excited. And that might sound strange, have an excited introvert. But yeah, excited introverts do exist. And there was another time when I was an excited introvert, which was my first day at my second ever job. I am walking into the reception area feeling a million miles tall. It's brilliant. And I'm thinking, nobody is going to put me down today. And then I get my pass card, and it's my first ever photo business card. And here I am, I proudly position it on me. How cool is that, huh? I've got a photo business card. Yeah, I feel great. Don't be too kind of mean to me, because I bet you had one of those days when you first of all got your first card, identity card or whatever it was called then. So here I am, I have walked into the business, the receptionist opens the door and I'm feeling a million miles tall. I take a step into the big office and then it hits me. I'm hit like a tsunami of noise. I don't know whether I'm up or down. I couldn't tell you either way. Every fibre in my body is saying, get out now. When I take a couple of breaths and I go, no, I'm going to go on. I'm led into the team room because the team meeting, the monthly team meeting is about to begin. But what's really interesting is that I realised that that noise was only 200 people in an open plan office just chatting together, which was quite scary really, because that amount of noise quite often puts introverts off. So I walk into the team meeting room, I'm sitting there and there's 2 or 3 people there and I shudder at the thought of the small talk that's going on. But that's okay. I can deal with that for a couple of minutes. And over the next 5 minutes, a few more people walk in and then some louder people walk in and there's a few kind of jokes being cracked and everything carries on. All is good. And then the boss walks in. The meeting begins and he hands round a 27-point agenda. Yes, 27 points. I'm talking 40 years ago and I can still remember it. Please don't tell anyone how old I am now. But the point to this is, not only was there a 27-point agenda, there was also a wad of paper this thick with data and graphs and tables and reports in it. And he proceeded to run the meeting like this. He'd ask a question about one of the bits of data and then he'd call somebody's name out and ask them to talk about it. And you could see people shrinking in front of him at this because they'd had no chance to prepare. They hadn't seen this stuff before. This was the first time I had seen it. Obviously, it's my first day. And the first time they had seen it. And it turns out there's a few people in the corner that every time he asks a question, they jump in there. I'm looking down at the reports though, and the answers they're giving have got no resemblance to the stuff that's going on. So I'm kind of wondering a little bit where he's getting this from. And he's rewarding these people who are answering really quickly, even though they seem to be talking nothing to do with the reports. And he's kind of penalising the people that take their moment to think about what's there and can't just answer stuff just like that. And it turns out that the way this meeting was run was quite common for this business. In fact, I found out that a large amount of the people in the business were not fully productive, didn't enjoy it, and certainly were not fully engaged and feeling comfortable. And about a year later, I left for just those reasons. And a number of the things that I've just covered are things which are things that cause people psychological issues, that stress people unnecessarily at work, particularly the introverts. And so if you're looking to get your whole team productive, we've really got to work on how to engage all of those. So I want to deal with that. But what I'd like to do is come back to this thing about introverts. And a little while ago, I asked you to define for me an introvert. And let's just see some of the things that came up on that slide. What have we got here? So we've got a number of words coming up there, some of which are really, really good. We've got thoughtful. Yeah, most people would say introverts are thoughtful. Quiet. Introverts aren't necessarily quiet, but it's quite common that they get called quiet. And oh, should be fine. Is that any better now? Yes? Okay, I'll carry on then. Sorry, Valentina. So a number of these words are good, and a number of them come from what I would call the two defining points of introversion. And so what I want to talk to you is about two defining points, and most of these other ones will flow from those. So I'm saying I want you to think about two words. The first word is, every time you think of introvert, I want you to think of the word energy. The second word I want you to think about anytime somebody says introvert is process. Let me explain those a bit more. Energy, people energy. An introvert will recharge, if you like, become energized when they're quietly on their own. When they're with a large group of people, and the larger the group and the least they know this group of people, they will de-energize, and the larger that group, they will de-energize more quickly. It's a bit like, have you ever had a mobile phone that's 2 or 3 years old? And you find that it runs out of battery really, really, really quickly. It's just like that. Whereas the extrovert in that same room will feel energized and feel great. Whereas if they're on their own, they will struggle a whole lot more. So for an introvert, they'll recharge on their own. And it becomes like a scarce resource. If you're running out of energy, you do anything to protect it. And Valentina loved the story I was telling about these little babies earlier on. She might ask about that again later. But the other thing I talked to you about was process. Internal processing or external processing, both of which are ways of describing how we think. Internal processing is something that introverts do, and you ask an introvert a question and they will think about the answer. They'll try and work out the most detailed, the most correct, the most accurate answer before giving it out. And I call that they think to talk. An extrovert asks the question and you'll get some words coming back. They talk to think, because when in the talking, it's how they're thinking about it. Now, neither of those is wrong, neither of those is right, better or worse. They are just different. And the point is, we need to understand these differences so we can all work together. And most of the things that come out of this, all of those definitional words that you put up, start to flow from just those 2 points. As do some of the myths around introversion. Let's just tackle some of the myths. The first one that comes up time and time again is that introverts are shy. Introverts are not shy. Shyness is a fear or a timidity of being in open and conversation with people you don't really know. Whereas, as I said, introversion is about energy and process. You can be a shy introvert. That's going to make it really, really hard. But equally, and this will mess with your mind a second, you can be a shy extrovert. Yeah, and I've got a couple of friends, and so it's actually really weird to watch shy extroverts around. The next myth that I want to talk about is that introverts are antisocial or standoffish. And the answer is no, they're not. But I think I understand where this one comes from. Because have you ever been in one of those big meeting rooms where perhaps there's networking going on, perhaps there's 50, 100 people in the room, and they're in little huddles of, 5 to 10 people, and you're standing in your little huddle. But here's me perhaps in my little huddle. I'm standing enjoying the conversation, but my energy, my people energy, starts to deplete. And as it depletes, I find I've got 2 things I can do. I could either just leave altogether, which doesn't do my networking much good, or I might just stand slightly back. So instead of in the center of that huddle, I've stood off a little bit to the back of that huddle and on the periphery of it. How might that be perceived? That might be perceived as being standoffish, because I did so just literally. I literally stood off. And so I think a number of people get perceived like that. Doesn't mean that it's the case. It's all about this energy. The third myth, and I think this is the saddest indictment of Western society, the third myth is that introverts are not good leaders. The reason I think this is sad is because we seem to be in a place where extroversion and success in business go hand in hand, and we have a success model which says be loud, be conversational, but be at the front of the room, be on podiums, dealing with the press. And of course, any leader has to do that from time to time. And an introverted leader might not be as comfortable at doing that as an extroverted leader. But I think there's far more to leadership than that. Let's think about things like vision. Whether you created it through a vision board that Joe was dealing with, or you've just got a vision and you're helping your staff drive towards delivering that vision for the business. Or maybe you are inspiring your staff to deliver, and perhaps you're even helping them, because one of the great things that leaders do is to help their staff perhaps stand up, to help their staff grow. And sometimes the best way to do that is put your staff in the limelight when they're comfortable doing so. And let's be honest, introverts might be better at that last bit, even more so than extroverts. So that might be something that you want to think about. Introverts can be very good leaders. But perhaps enough of the myths. Perhaps want to think about the fact that what I'm talking about is communication. A lot of it revolves around communication, and communication doesn't have to be loud to be effective. It has to be effective. You can have silent communication and it can be just as effective. Do you remember when I left you? I was 5-6 meters under the water. Now this is the part of the dive where we have to make sure that we're going to live throughout the dive. So it's kind of useful, and the communication is kind of essential. Have you ever tried to talk with your head under the bathwater? I can see Valentina thinking about that one just now. And blob, 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 blob. It doesn't work so well. However, as divers we have to do it. And it goes like this. I'm okay. Are you okay? Yep, we're both okay. Can we check our computers? Can we check our air? Can we check that I've got no bubbles coming from my equipment? So at that point it's, yep, we're all okay. We're going to sink down. We're good to dive. And we're going to go that way. And there we did. We dropped down this blue rope. 30 meters under the water down to the bottom, the sandy bottom of the sea. And at that point it's kind of dark. No, it's actually very sandy. Only we start to see things that are hidden in plain sight. Have you ever found things that you didn't previously notice that were there? And we suddenly see these fish just lying on the floor of the sea. They're like the introverts of the undersea world. But we carry on swimming across these to what happens next. But the reason I talk about this hidden in plain sight is really because back in business land, introverts have become accustomed to the fact that they have to hide in plain sight. They have to pretend to be extroverts to help their success. And I'm imploring you to treat introverts differently, but they're hiding from you. So how on earth are you going to do that? So here's a couple of things. Let's just put an outline around our little fish. And let's think about, do some of your team, are they more sociable with people they know or don't know? If they're more sociable with people they know, it might be they're introverted. Do they socialise inconsistently? So is it one day they're happy to go out but another day they're not? It could just be that their people energy some days is much lower than others because they've been spending time with a lot of people. Neither of these two on their own is a sign that they are introverted, but they're just little signs that might help. Do they tend to stand around on the edges of the room, or are they much more in the centre? Do they prefer email to phone? Again, introverts tend to prefer emails to phones. So there's just little signs that you could use to help you to spot the introverts in your room. So what I next want to do is I want to think about the strengths of introverts. And I'd like you to just jump back to Mentimeter again, if you would be so kind. And I'd like you to have a go at voting, and just again, a couple of words on what you think the strengths of introverts are. So I'm just going to break for a second. And again, just some 2 or 3 word answers, what do you think the biggest strengths of introverts are? I get to have another drink and you get to do lots of typing. And then the reason I do this is because I don't claim to have, I've done lots of research in this, but I don't claim to have all the expertise in the world. You guys see this stuff all the time. And so sometimes it's about seeing and learning from each other. What do you think the strengths of introverts are? Let's just pull that one back, shall we, and just see some of the words that have been coming up. So here we have thoughtful. They're good at listening. They tend to be reflective. They're good listeners. Okay, so we've just got a few more words coming in as we talk. So I'm going to leave that up, but I'm going to give you the most commonly spoken about ones. Most common strengths of introverts are they are great listeners. They also are very good at doing detail, and they tend to be good at summarizing. Now, if you're ever looking for a role for an introvert in your team that will help you and the introvert and your whole team, that could mean that they're very good at facilitating your meetings. Put them in charge of the meeting so that you can stand back and you can focus on the content of the meetings rather than how the meeting is run. Get the introvert to do that. They are naturally good at that. One of the other things that introverts come up with as a strength is as long as they think you are interested, they tend to be very good at challenging in a very constructive way. So they will be good at challenging things. Again, can be very, very useful as part of a team so that you don't just kind of hair off in one direction, which I would call groupthink. You start to have a much more balanced team discussion. Now you may remember I'd been swimming over the sandy, boring floor of the sea when suddenly, about 20 meters away, I see what I call the drag queens of the undersea world. There's these beautiful lionfish. Lionfish have got these kind of long frond-like feathers that hang out from them, and they look all different colours. And they're swimming across. And these lionfish are swimming in towards this diver. There's this diver that's lying on the seabed. And he's just wiggling his fingers and then holding them still. And then wiggling them again and holding them still. And each time he holds them still, the lionfish just creep in a little bit further, which is clearly what he wants to happen. And then we sit there and we just watch this, and suddenly I think, oh my goodness, I'm 20 meters away and I know something about lionfish that this guy clearly doesn't. And I'm going to tell you that something about lionfish. You know those lovely Danny LaRue-like fronds hanging from around them? That's how they paralyze their prey. They're poisonous. And he's attracting these things towards him. And so he's lying there and they're just creeping in on him. And he wants it. So we swim really quickly over. Hold back, back, hold back, hold back, get back. We kind of get through that and he works out what the problem is and he backs off away from the lionfish. And there's a relevance to this, of course. Have you ever had in your team, have you ever met a time when there's 2 or 3 people that you just think, I wish they would speak up more in the meetings? And perhaps there's a couple of people that never shut up. Well, one of the things you're going to need to do if you want to get the quieter ones to speak is to hold back some of the noisier ones. There's 2 or 3 ways that you could do. You could literally, politely, of course, ask them to quieten down, or you could say to everybody, everyone's going to get to speak, but you're going to get a minute each, and you cut the ones off at a minute that just keep going. And the third one you could sometimes get them to do is, okay, what I want to do now is I want you to write your answers down to the following question, and then everyone's silent for a minute or 2, and then you get them to read out. What now happens is the introverts are much more engaged in the session. They're going to be much more aligned with the results because you've included them all the way through. So holding back is a great tip for getting more. So there I was. We've kind of pushed through the lionfish. We've got through the lionfish issue and we get to today's objective of the dive. We've got to Shark Point, where we get there and we're surrounded by sharks just swimming around us. These are beautiful creatures. However, they have got this evil, malevolent glare as they go past. We are mesmerised by these creatures. So much so that we forget one thing, that divers are normally absolutely critically aware of time. Because when you're diving, you have the gift of time, you carry it around in an air tank on your back. Suddenly, I'm running out of air, we've got to go up. So up we go, changing all the plans, we head up and we get to 5 meters again and we hover around at 5 meters and we have to stay there for 3 minutes because, well, have you ever had a child, or perhaps you've done it yourself, got a bottle of Coke, choking it up and opened it just like that and all over the place? Well, that's what your blood is like as a diver if you go straight to the surface. So we hover around for 3 minutes first. And there we are. I'm hovering there 2 minutes. I'm looking at my air. 1 minute 30. I'm not going to have enough air. 1 minute to go. Am I going to get the gift of time? 30 seconds. No, we're there. I can go up safely without having to run out of air. Get to the top. I take out my reg. And I take the nicest breath of air I've ever had in my life. We had been given the gift of time. And there's a couple of other things I noticed at that same time. The sun is setting beautifully. There's a stunning sunset over there. But over there, a long way over there, is the boat. We were meant to come up underneath the boat. And what's more, the current is pushing us that way, away from the boat. But I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Because, again, this gift of time. What is it you can do for the introverts in your team? Give them the gift of time. The single biggest thing is the gift of time. And this comes back to our old friend, the internal processing, the way people think. So that might be that you give them the gift of time by holding back. It might be you give them the gift of time by not jumping in and answering things for them. Because you know, one of the things that extroverts hate is gaps in the conversation, and they just jump in the conversation when there's a gap. And of course, an introvert will be going, if you ask the introvert the question, there's that internal processing little gap, and then they move on. Whereas the extrovert hears the gap, jumps in. So give the gift of time. But the final way, and the most important way you can do this, is the agenda. As much information as possible at whatever meeting you've got. If you want the introvert to think through, if you want your whole team to have good, sensible answers, get the meeting agenda, get all the data out a week before. The internal processing introvert will absorb the information because they've done that. When you're in the meeting, remember they're not shy, they're not timid, but they want to think through the data. By getting them that data beforehand, you've now allowed them to join into the meeting. You're going to get a much richer and much more powerful result from your meeting instead. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. But there I was, you remember, being pushed that way. Sun's over there, the boat's over there. And we just, okay, we can do this, we'll just swim. And so we swim for a minute or two, get about 5-6 meters further forward, and we get pushed back every time we rest for a second. And this goes on for about 5 minutes, and we're getting nowhere very, very fast. And my buddy Anne is starting to obviously get a little nervous, and I'm starting to get a little tetchy. And she says to me, John, the sun's setting. Yes, Anne. John, the sun's setting and the sharks feed at sunset. That was the moment when I absolutely questioned everything I'm doing because I'm getting nowhere and the sharks feed at sunset. And this thing about questioning might be a good time to say, have we got any questions? So I'm just going to offer you to unmute yourselves for a second. And if we've got some questions, very happy to deal with those. I'm getting no instructions coming in my earpiece. Yeah, literally, I'm just thinking 1 or 2 questions if we've got a minute, and then. A tip. Say that one again, Valentina. A tip for. Oh, toilet rolls. Right. Okay. What do the toilet rolls have to do with that? Absolutely. My friends here. So remember I talked about scarce resources and people energy. And one of the ways I found of getting this over, because if you're running low on energy, you want to conserve it. You do it consciously or subconsciously as an introvert because you know you're running low. I came back from holiday from Thailand. I had a fantastic holiday in Thailand in February this year. And I landed back and I knew there was one thing I needed to buy from the shop on the way home so that I could return home comfortably because I didn't have any at home. But do you remember the great toilet roll shortage of March 2020? Yep, I'd been away in Thailand and every single toilet roll in the United Kingdom had been used up or hoarded somewhere. Now, I'm not going to tell you how I got through this problem because really that's a detail you don't want. But believe me, consciously and subconsciously, I was managing that scarce resource, which was my toilet rolls, for a few days. I'm just going to stop there. I'm not going into any more detail, you'll be pleased to know, Valentina. But it's just an example of this scarce resource thing. And we all do it in different ways. But for introverts, it's about the people energy. Might have time for one more if there's another one. Okay, I'll just finish off then because I've just got one more minute to finish off. If that's okay. So the final question that sometimes gets asked of me is, John, what happened? I've still got 10 fingers, 2 arms, and 2 legs. I didn't get eaten by sharks, and the way it happened is kind of another bit of a moral as well. Have you ever had this time when you want to get somewhere and you keep going, but you're just getting absolutely nowhere? You're just fighting against stuff. It's just like I was fighting against that current. And I'm imploring you to change your communications, but not to completely change direction, but just to refine it slightly. And what happened with this dive? We're fighting against the current, but instead of keep on going straight forward, we just took a couple of degrees off, a small change of angle, and suddenly we weren't fighting the current as hard. And so I'm just using that as an example to sit there and say, you know what? You can change your communication style very slightly, but most importantly, keep on going. We were able to do that, and suddenly the boat could see us because we no longer were we in front of the sun, and they could come and pick us up. So it really did work. But I've been talking to you about the importance of engaging your whole team, because the biggest negative thing in any team is groupthink, where everybody rushes off in one direction. The most positive thing is diversity of thinking. And if you want to get that diversity of thinking and a healthier workplace, 2 things: understand the introverts and give the gift of time. Thank you.